when I get here before you, I infringe on your space.
That's okay, that's what the auditor does.
I expand to the available.
Treasurer is much more well-behaved. What's that? I said you're much more well-behaved. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are live on our Zoom. The recording is running as well as a transcript and closed captions. And I do believe I see Commissioner Naves, so I imagine we have our speakers on as well. And we'll do a roll call for quorum.
Sure.
Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
Commissioner Racines.
Here.
Commissioner Pope.
Here.
Commissioner Naves.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
Commissioner Revel.
Excuse, we'll keep track of him. I would just admonish folks up here, sometimes it's really hard to hear if your microphone is not on. So,
And Chairman Gordon.
I am here.
Excellent. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Director. Good to see you, Stephanie. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll read my announcement and disclaimer for the morning. So agendas and sign-in sheets are outside the room. If you are attending, please do fill those out. We also have our disclaimer. Key decisions pertaining to the Wyoming Stable Token Initiative will be made by the commissioners of the Stable Token Commission or the state legislature in public meetings such as this. Further, the only commissioners are those appointed by statute, the governor, or majority vote of the commission. At this time, Wyoming stable tokens are not available for purchase. Prototype tokens with no backing reserves and therefore no financial value have been issued on testnets for the Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Arbitrum, Base, Optimism, and Polygon blockchains. These are for testing purposes only, and smart contract addresses are published on our website. As such, any website or platform claiming to sell or distribute Wyoming stable tokens should be considered fraudulent. Please do not attempt to purchase tokens from unauthorized sources. Information outside of these public meetings should only be considered factual and legitimate if it is distributed through our official channels. At this time, these are limited to our website at stabletoken.wyo.gov, the Wyoming legislature website at wyoleg.gov, and our social media channels with the @WyoStable username on Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, and Warpcast. And Mr. Chairman, if it is your pleasure, I will go through and review the day's agenda, and we can take it from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in terms of today's agenda, we'll go through the meeting minutes for our last two meetings. So that'll cover both March and April. We'll go through the monthly budget review ending April 30th of this year. We'll have both the A&I version of that as well as work towards leveraging the version created by our CFO, Joseph Saldana. I'll provide a verbal update on the Select Committee's first meeting of the interim, which was held on May 14th and 15th. Provide a verbal update on vendor negotiations and contracting, and then briefly speak about rescheduling our October meeting by a few days. I'll provide the industry update. We'll review the May 2025 rulemaking update memo, as we have 3 sets of rules currently up either in public comment or now complete with public comment. We'll review some preliminary process flows for several of the functions of the Wyoming stable token and our relationships with the participants involved. We'll wrap up our Q1 2025 blockchain selection exercise ahead of restarting the quarterly rolling process again next month. We will have a legal subcommittee update, which we anticipate having in an executive session under the confidential information clause to receive input from the Attorney General's office. And then I do believe we'll have one memo that we'll need to discuss in the public forum after the executive session, which is the financial authorization memo. We'll discuss next steps, upcoming meetings and events, and then we'll have public comment. Are there any questions on the agenda?
Questions? Hearing none, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next item on our agenda are meeting minutes from our March 20th meeting, STC-023, and our April 17th meeting, STC-024. I sent these out previously, so please haven't had a chance to review them. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or review at the kind of 10,000 foot level. However, if the commissioners are comfortable, I would defer to you in terms of approving these individually, simultaneously, or going through and reviewing before that approval process.
Commissioners, you have had a chance to review the minutes. Are there changes, additions, comments on on any matters in them? If not, I would entertain a motion, either individually or together.
I would move to approve both sets of minutes presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Racinas. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Wallace. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. The minutes carry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to our next item would be the monthly budget review for the month ending April 30th. So again, you'll have 3 large sheets of paper in front of you. The first one we should look at is the summary level detail of the monthly budget summary. Again, this is derived from numbers that come from the Office of Administration and Information's accounting team. And what we do with these on a month-to-month basis is summarize the series of expenses that we incur. And as usual, one of the main drivers of our monthly expenses is salaries and benefits. This has stabilized essentially since January, so this is a very well expected and anticipated outlay. And the 900 series funds where we maintain most of our capital has been allocated for the remainder of the biennium into that bucket. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward and familiar. In terms of the 200 series, we get into travel. This is where we have a decent chunk of expense in April at $4,000. That includes travel to the DC Blockchain Summit in terms of accommodations and spend on the ground, and also flights for the Avalanche Summit at ETH Dublin, which is all my attendance, as well as Ms. Brooks' attendance of the Digital Euro Conference, and the flights to get our CFO, Joseph Saldana, and CISO, Keith Lawhorn, to Toronto for the consensus event, although those were speaking events for the members of our team. In terms of telecom charges in the 400 series, again, that's stabilized. Hardware and software has stabilized. And now the final thing I'd point out in April is we are now starting to have some of these vendor amounts hit our monthly budget. You could see for attorney services, that's Paul Hastings, that's several months brought together for the $38,000 charge. We've got a note on the side around the expectation for the next month. And then in terms of the contract services, the 71,900 is our contract with Layer 0, which is predominantly an upfront payment for all the smart contracts that were deployed on the test nets. We do expect that in May, we'll have a first charge from Inca Digital, which we've engaged as our open source intelligence provider. And again, we'll keep rolling that forward as we bring on more and more vendors. Again, the treasurer has asked in previous meetings about kind of how these vendors are getting paid. It's fairly customized per vendor. There are some that are kind of, or one predominantly that would be BIPS based on our market supply. Some are upfront, some are recurring services on a monthly basis, some are ad hoc. So I believe Joe's done a really incredible job of laying out when we expect to have those charges, but that is to say that there is some variance between the vendors that'll be captured here, so I'll make sure to call it out when those expenses hit. Are there any questions on the summary level detail?
Questions? Questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Director Paulo. This is helpful.
Thank you. One more thing I'd mention is in terms of expense to date, we've spent something around a bit here, about $725,000 of a $5.8 million budget. So we're spending about 12.5% of the total budget so far, and we're about halfway through the biennial fiscal year. Again, we do expect our spend to accelerate because we will be engaging third-party vendors for the deployment, development, and ongoing management and maintenance of the Wyoming Stable Token. But I do believe we've continued to be good fiscal stewards of the program and will continue to do so. If you move to the larger sheet of paper, that's the folded one. This is, again, continues to be a bit of a work in progress until we get the final vendor contracts signed, at which point we can kind of finalize this and we'll start using this as the predominant method of sharing our fiscal status with the commission. But this is the version that Joe has put together. There are expected expenses on a month-to-month basis rather than just buckets. And we have variances for a month-to-month perspective as well. A couple things I want to quickly point out. If you're just looking at the chart on the bottom left here, if you look at that year-to-date variances, that first number in the top right, that 589,000 for contract services, that's the savings on contracts we expect through the negotiations we've been doing. So we believe we saved about over $500,000 through those negotiations. That's given us some room to create an additional temporary salary, potentially for an executive assistant. We'll have a conversation about that probably in the next month or two, but we certainly have a large workload, and possibly bringing someone on in that capacity would be helpful. We've also allocated $500,000 for marketing along the way as the token gets off the ground, and $500,000 in currently the miscellaneous bucket, but that could be used potentially for R&D, which is a statutory carve-out we do have the ability to fund. So even with those additional expenses, we are still looking at a grand total spend through the biennium of $5.2 million. So we're saving about $550,000 to $600,000 from the expected projections for the full biennium. And hopefully that answers some questions we've had along the way. Commissioner Wallace, I know you've asked about our projecting all of the vendors, kind of a long tail to make sure we've got coverage. And I think that this speaks to exactly that. And as we kind of finish flourishing this out, I could tell you firsthand that Joe's models are extremely detailed, and we're happy to share those to start playing around with things like market supply, interest rates, adoption level, growth curves. And we are, there's a lot of work that's gone into that, and we're happy to share that shortly. I would happy to answer any questions, but if I did miss anything in terms of the financials, I would also appreciate an opportunity to recognize Mr. Saldana to fill in any blanks.
Thank you, Director, and Joseph, thank you very, very much for your work on this. Are there observations, questions? This is very helpful. I'd love to see all the multiple tabs behind that, but Joe, I understand what a challenge that is. Did you want to speak to what you've done here at all, Joe?
Happy to, through the guidance of the executive director, Apollo, and also meeting with all the various commissioners, we were able to, and the team as well, were able to put together a rather robust and comprehensive model that, as Director Apollo mentioned, has about 6 to 8 databases linked all together and married up to the capital markets. So we get real-time yield curve information for the capital markets. And then we also have projections going on for growth rates of token supply. We're using 2 models to do that. We're using Monte Carlo scenario and linear regression to do that as well. And we could change between the two just to get a baseline in terms of what we see going forward, a potential path of the token supply going forward. We're using the historical trends of USDT and USDC to guide us in terms of what the over and under growth path could be on a monthly basis. And we use that as a trajectory to figure out what the best path forward will be for the agency in terms of revenues. And on the expense side, we have detailed models for each and every one of the vendors, their cash flows, as well as the timing of those cash flows. And at the moment, I know Commissioner Meyer had questions surrounding the variability of some of those expenses. And at the moment right now, it's just Franklin, whose expense base is married to the assets under management within the reserve trust and the liquidity fund account. And I'm happy to share any information surrounding these models.
Fantastic, thank you. Any questions? If none, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item on our list is the Select Committee interim session. Again, there was the first meeting of the Select Committee on blockchain, financial innovation, and digital innovation technology 2 weeks ago in Jackson, May 14th to 15th. I provided about, I think, over 3 hours of testimony on day one. I did provide the Q2 2025 report that I submitted to the Select Committee, to the commissioners as well, with a kind of update, just to replay some of this here in regards to both the meeting and the takeaways from our side. One of the critical pieces of testimony that came before my tenure on the dais was testimony from Chris Land, who serves as the general counsel for Senator Cynthia Lummis and works on both the Genius Act in the Senate. And he did make the public statement that there is an anticipated non-applicability of both the Stable and Genius Acts to Wyoming State and the Wyoming Stable Token. As expected, we are not going to be considered under the definition of a person, which is meant to be banks, issuers, trusts, other business entities that may put out a stable coin, but states are not to be found there, and that was made quite clear to us in that discussion. In terms of some of the other nuance that were presented, we did bring up several of the kind of granular details around financial projections and the ability for us to establish a 102% reserve, what those growth curves would look like. We provided some additional commentary about the basket of permitted investments as it sits now. If it were to adopt a 2A7 structure, which is a regulatory wrapper that's used by Circle, particularly through the BlackRock trust that they have, and will give us an SEC wrapper. We provided some discussions around opening the bucket of permitted investments to accommodate a yield-bearing stable token in the future, and also had some documentation from the Treasurer's Office that we incorporated about a public purpose investment, which the Treasurer brought up in a previous conversation. We also reviewed at a high level some of what our team had found during our review of terms of use of other incumbent stablecoins around prohibited use of the stablecoins. There was some concerns on our side around what we can or could not prohibit, brought that to the attention of the Select Committee, and the expectation now is that they are going to clarify their legislative intent through a letter and tell us whether they intend for us to go through and figure out what we are going to incorporate or prohibit, or if we're going to essentially say any lawful use for our side, and then also have considerations around what our licensed service providers, what their tolerance is. I can certainly tell you we've gone through this many times internally on our calls. Commissioner Naves had brought up the astute point that some of the feedback that we've seen in these terms of services is not from the issuers necessarily, but from their financial partners. So this is something that we want to make sure that we are covering in our discussions internally as well. And in terms of next steps, the Select Committee is interested in, I'll at a high level use the word converting, for lack of a better term, the Stable Token Commission to the Wyoming Digital Asset Authority, giving us a broader remit, including our group in a discussion around digital asset taxonomy, which is to say, go through all of the language that's been defined since 10 years ago in the state of Wyoming around digital assets, but industry has adopted different terminology in some places. We want to make sure we standardize and are aligned there. And there's also interest in investigating the ability for the state to issue commodity-backed tokens. I'll refer to those as real-world assets, for example, gold-backed tokens. When that did come up, I was asked for an opinion on that. I did mention that should the Select Committee want to move forward in that capacity, there is certainly a lot of lessons learned that we've had along the way with the stable token in terms of the initial setup. There's also a lot of complexity with any kind of real world concern, especially as you scale from, let's say, one precious metal to another, or rare earth or uranium or what have you. They all would look different in terms of how they're custodied, retrieved. There's different considerations around how things are stored, security, how they are tokenized. So a lot to come there. I think this is early interest, and we'll see what they want to do in terms of drafting legislation, but we're only about a month and a half away from the next meeting of the Select Committee. So I think we'll find out sooner rather than later. Any questions on the discussion we had with the Select Committee?
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Pope?
a couple of comments along with that. Mr. Land, when he spoke, he indicated that the Congress had decided not to include a provision in the budget that would allow essentially tax-free redemptions and use of stable tokens, statutorily backed stable tokens. And in my communications with him afterward, he indicated that Congress felt that rather than fight that fight, the IRS has the ability to make that change through rule as opposed to through statute. And so Mr. Land asked that the Select Committee consider drafting a letter to the IRS requesting that change. And I have since reached out to members of the digital asset group with the AICPA and the accounting working group at the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance. And I will be speaking with them next month to have both the AICPA and the WSBA consider drafting their own letters to provide additional impetus to this. I would like the Stable Token Commission to consider a letter from the commission also to the IRS requesting that change. And so I just wanted to start that discussion. Mr. Land feels it's not really necessary to have that until the end of the year, so we have plenty of time to talk, but at least to have that discussion within this group.
Thank you, Commissioner Pope. If there is really no objection, I would recommend that perhaps you could draft a letter that we would have something to look at, if that makes sense.
I'm happy to, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. And Director, I guess, you know, it's not really in the form of a question, but my concern here is that we not try to take on too much stuff too quickly, because I think we have made great progress. And the framework, if we can get it fully established and practicing, then will be a great example of how we can do the others. But I hope that the legislation is like blockchain committee doesn't sort of dump a load of extra work on us that will challenge us to be able to get everything accomplished.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the point is well taken. Thankfully, we are not in a position where this is going to add really any additional workload in the immediate future. We're not responsible for drafting legislation. We're not responsible for, we can certainly educate and provide information, but beyond that, it's kind of out of our scope, the work that LSO does with the legislature. Should this go into effect, it would be downstream of the next legislative session, so I would imagine. There was also, I believe, not even a conversation, but at least a high-level comment recognizing that personnel and budget would be required. And I think that's probably about the except what I want to say, but and that's one last thing I want to say. We've already done the exercise of the token taxonomy internally as part of our work with the externs we had in the spring semester through the University of Wyoming. So we've already done a little bit of that work for our own reference during rulemaking. So some of this, again, we'll have and just be able to provide to them from an educational perspective. But I would not expect to take, for any of this to really take us as a delta off the path that we're already on.
That's good. I only worry about it because the legislature is often good about giving responsibility without resource. So,
understood, Mr. Chairman. Any other questions on the select committee?
very good.
Okay. Moving on to the next topic, which is contracting and negotiations. I'm happy to let the group here know that we are now contracted with Fireblocks for the purposes of providing token infrastructure. To give a little bit of context about that relationship, they do a lot of assistance with private key management. So we're already set up on a test version of the platform. We are being onboarded to the production version of that platform. And one thing worth mentioning is Fireblocks and Layer 0, who we've engaged previously for the purposes of token issuance. They are now somewhat collaborating amongst themselves. They put out a press release on it a week or so ago. So what they're doing is creating a more unified structure behind the scenes, which we'll be able to take part of and make a more efficient process on our side. We'll get the kind of security and scalability of Fireblocks and the ability to delegate signing responsibilities, as well as the token issuance and interoperability through Layer 0. So that kind of new configuration will be done in about 2 weeks. And then once that is complete, we'll be one of the first kind of projects on the platform. And then that'll facilitate the redeployment of our smart contracts and getting our pilot programs off the ground. The other document I have in front of you is the contracts overview, which I believe provides a insight into the remaining negotiations, which I'll be a little coy about just because it's our ongoing negotiations. But these are to provide the commission an idea of who's still remaining to sign with, the extent of negotiations in terms of having contracts and multiple attachments. A lot of the work we're doing here is wrapping essentially our Wyoming state contract around, software contracts, MSAs. So it's been, a bit cumbersome. The financial and reserves management side has its own custom agreements and agreements inside of agreements. But I do want to take a moment, and you're seeing a couple of initials on here in Teams. I do want to thank Devin Kenny and Tyler Renner in the Attorney General's office, as well as Erin Edwards and the RISC team, who have been incredibly supportive of this effort. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of hurry up and wait, and they've been incredibly responsive and attentive to these matters. So I just wanted to give them a quick thank you in this forum. And then one more thing I would mention here, which is there will be probably a knock-on impact to our timeline with this, with the contracts still ongoing. Obviously, we need to make sure we get this done right. We also need to make sure we have the rest of our compliance framework in place. So while we've been talking about an early July launch, there may be a kind of a knock-on to that. We'll talk more about that at our June meeting with a more formal go-to-market and inventory of what needs to get done. But I'm still confident in saying well within Q3. But if we have, let's say, a contractor in this mix that needs a couple of weeks to get set up with X accounts of whatever, once we sign, that will, again, have a kind of a material impact to the timeline. So we continue pushing forward on all of this. I do expect to have kind of a refreshed roadmap at our June meeting, which is only going to be in about 2 and change weeks because we pushed this one out with the legislative session. But wanted to just highlight that quickly and take any questions on the contracts overview or timeline at a high level.
Questions? If there are none?
I'm not seeing any on the call, on the line, the Zoom line either.
Yeah, Stephanie indicated no.
Okay, thank you. Last one, the updates and approvals is the STC-30 reschedule. This is our October meeting, formally scheduled for October 16th. That will collide with the Jackson Hole Technology Partnerships annual Wyoming Global Tech Summit, which typically a number of the commissioners and myself attend and or speak at. So I had proposed moving this to October 21st. Mr. Chairman, we do have clearance on your calendar for that at the same time from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. So just wanted to run that by the rest of the commissioners and see if there's any opposition or appetite for that.
Commission, your thoughts? It sounds as though that's okay. We are doing budget hearings, and I will try to accommodate as appropriate, but you have very accomplished commissioners here. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, we'll continue moving forward here to go through our stable token industry update. A number of things moving, so I'll try to go through them a bit more quickly. From a market cap perspective, again, still hovering around that all-time high, about $234 billion of stable tokens, up about 42% from this time last year. And those stable coins are responsible for about $2.1 trillion in monthly transfer volume. In terms of domestic news, we've been obviously watching the stablecoin legislation at the federal level. With the Genius Act in the Senate, there was a failed cloture vote in early May to essentially vote on whether they would continue the debate. That was then reversed in mid-May, and the Senate is now debating the bill and writing their amendments. In the House, the Stable Act already had amendments earlier in the month, and they're awaiting a floor vote on that. And for whatever it's worth, both of those bills, as far as they stand at this point in their drafting, prohibit the distribution of yield for payment stablecoins. Also, I believe this was just yesterday, the market structure bill around digital assets was introduced on the House. That's the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, or Clarity Act. And predominantly, I've not had a chance to go through it in full. It's a 250-ish page document. But predominantly, one of the things it does is delineate responsibilities between the SEC and the CFTC. So I was going to say just one more comment on that. This will be another instance of, even if this bill was to pass as a framework like the Stable or the Genius Act at the federal level, there's still going to be multiple federal agencies responsible for rulemaking that will take some time before we see that fully in effect. Speaking of the SEC, Commissioner Hester Peirce put out a piece called A Creative and Cooperative Balancing Act, proposing potentially exemptive relief for securities issued using distributed ledger technology until they're able to kind of come up with these types of rule sets. And the SEC also yesterday, I believe, put out a statement on protocol staking activities to say protocol staking does not involve the offer and sale of securities, and therefore there's no need to register. So if you are involved at the technical level, I have, let's say, X number or 32 ETH or Ether on the Ethereum blockchain, I can create a staking pool and become part of that network and be rewarded as a result. The SEC's kind of preliminary statement says not a security, despite the fact that you are receiving some kind of passive benefit along the way. And then two more. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo are reportedly in early discussions to launch a joint stablecoin. That being said, the bank consortium discussions are in early conceptual stages and could change. Possibly a behemoth, possibly too much competition amongst themselves to get off the ground, but that's the rumor mill. And then last one, and Mr. Chairman, I think you may have missed this in the last discussion. There is a territory called Tinian in the Northern Marianas that is looking to do its own stablecoin as part of a online gambling bill. Their legislature passed that. It was vetoed by their governor, but the legislature, the Northern Mariana Islands House, voted 14-2 to overturn that veto. So we're still in competition with a small island territory about to launch a stablecoin, potentially on eCash. Any questions on any of the domestic news?
Are there any questions? I like our chances here.
So do I, Mr. Chairman.
Famous last words.
So from the international perspective, Banco Santander is one of Europe's largest banks. They're considering launching their own stablecoin and moving its crypto offerings for retail clients via its digital bank, Open Bank. The Legislative Council of Hong Kong passed their stablecoins bill and created a new licensing regime for fiat-referenced stablecoin issuers. They must obtain a license from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, no surprises on that, but they're also moving forward. And then in terms of the incumbents, coming back around to Circle, they had announced an IPO in early April, kind of rescinded the next day due to some of the confusion around the tariffs. Then there was rumors they'd be bought by Ripple, they might be bought by Coinbase, but as of earlier this week, they are back to going public under the ticker symbol CRCL, and I believe the offering price would be about $6.7 billion. Another thing I wanted to point out, piece of news around incumbents, Coinbase, one of the largest domestic exchanges we had a fairly massive security breach where the personal identification, home addresses, pictures of its users, as well as transaction histories was made publicly available through essentially a customer service team they had outsourced. Not to make this overly personal, but this has impacted people I've worked with previously in my career in cryptocurrency. People receiving ransoms and threats, people having to move their families. So I don't mean to belabor the point on this, but when we talk about how serious some of the security issues are here in this topic, in this realm, the understanding of how we have to custody our data, encrypt the data, use anonymity proofs on that data, this is a very serious topic. And I just want the commission to be aware of that, what happens when you don't necessarily take care to perform those steps. Any questions on the rest of the news?
Any questions? I don't see anything online either. Yeah, so, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to our May 2025 rulemaking update memo. So to quickly level set, we have 3 different rule sets currently in place or moving forward. One of those is reserves management, which I will be quick about because this is the most recently approved rule set by the commission. We approved that in mid-April, then we received approval to proceed from the governor's office a few weeks later. And that rule set was uploaded to the Secretary of State's Administrative Record System, Wyoming Administrative Record System, also known as WARS. So that was uploaded for its 45-day notice and comment period starting on May 14th. We distributed an alert on that from the governor's office as well as ourselves as the commission. And the public comment period ends on June 30th of this year at 5 p.m. Members of the public can submit comments through the commission website at stabletoken.wyo.gov. At this time, no comments have been received by the commission pertaining to the reserves management rules, and there are no actions required by the commission at this time, although I will pause to ask if there are any questions I can answer on the reserves management piece. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to the next rule set, which is procurement. So in the memo, we call out the statutory ability for us to move forward with our procurement rules. We got those uploaded to the Secretary of State's system for public comment on April 11th, and the 45-day notice and comment period ended this Tuesday, May 27th at 5 p.m. No comments were received by the commission pertaining to the procurement rules during that period. So in terms of how this process works as we move forward with rulemaking, I have already, well, let me rephrase that. The commission has already approved or empowered the executive director to move forward through the steps in terms of promulgating the rule set. That being said, there is a distinct carve out in the rules or in the process for promulgation of rules where the board or commission will need to approve the final rule set. As there were no changes, I would imagine that there were no comments rather, there would be no changes to the rule set. And I have I did not print out the 60 pages of paper that you've all seen for the fourth time, but we have a couple of just papers here for the certificate and the packet that go together. But as long as we have, if the commission is comfortable approving my moving forward with the next steps and adopting the rules, I do believe that would take a majority vote, and then we would move forward from that. So, well, I probably should have written this down. The director's recommendation would be to adopt the existing procurement rules for final rulemaking. That would be the extent of it.
Thank you. Director Stephanie, any?
Door.
Go ahead. I'm
I'm
sorry.
shutting the door.
Oh, okay. It's a good thing about being around tractors long. Can't hear that stuff. Members of the commission, you've heard the director's recommendation. What are your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I would move final adoption of the procurement rule set as previously proposed.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Meyer, moved by Commissioner Rosales. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Abstentions? The rule package is moved forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll do much the same for the public records rules. So again, this was a pretty simple adoption of the uniform procedures, fees, costs, and charges for inspection, copying, and producing public records that was initially put forth by ANI. Many agencies, including the Attorney General's office, also adopt these rules. We're doing much the same. We did receive one comment on this, and because we didn't receive a plurality of comments because it's one singular one, we simply have reproduced it here in this package, and we do need to propose responses as part of this process. The public comment reads as follows. Information from the commission or Wyoming stablecoin is public. All of your work produce has been paid for by the public already, and they shouldn't have to pay twice for any records. Fees only serve as a deterrent and instill suspicions and distrust. All public requested records should be given free of charge. Proposed response from our side would be, the fees detailed in the uniform fee rules are to account for the materials and resources required to produce records when requested. Wyoming law provides for the charging of fees for public records and is designed to balance the public's right to information against the burden that public record requests can pose. For this reason, fees are only assessed after exceeding a certain threshold set in the uniform fee rules. And perhaps the commission does not recommend changes to the rules based on this comment. So similarly to the last one, what we would look to do here is to adopt the preliminary public records rules as the final rules without any changes. And I can move forward then with the existing authority to respond and file the appropriate paperwork to complete the promulgation of the rule set.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate the public comment. I think, Mr. Treasurer, you and I, with our unclaimed property experience, the departments have a good understanding of how people from out of state can use that process to be able to lever more money from folks in Wyoming. So I fully understand the response and appreciate that. I'm prepared to take any comment on or a motion if it's appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, I would move final adoption of the same set of rules that was promulgated from our last time.
Commissioner Racines, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there a second? It's been seconded by the treasurer. Commissioner Meyer, any further comment? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Very good. Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess I kind of have a question, maybe a request, maybe that, because we necessarily don't have any internal, I guess, counsel or attorneys, and we don't want to spend a bunch of money with our external folks on issues, but we need to, I think, as this federal legislation goes through, as we pass these things, when it gels a little bit on the federal level, if we could have the AG's office actually, do an overview to make sure that anything that we've already done as far as adopt rules or different things, that we don't get crosswise, or the feds don't get crosswise with us. And maybe it goes without saying, but I just think that that's probably where, if we could have that capacity, because we have it internally, that's be something that you'd ask the Attorney General to keep their eye on. Thank you, Mr.
So conveyed. Yeah, thank you. Devin's on it.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I had hid them from myself. The motions were written on the last page. There we go. They were there somewhere. Pardon. So moving on to our next topic, we have some preliminary process flows for the life cycle of the Wyoming stable token. We can walk through these fairly quickly just to give you an idea of how these are going to come together. And then, over time, you'll become more nuanced. We'll get, more detailed versions on specific steps from some of our counterparties. We just wanted to bring the commission through some of what we're looking at. And we could start with we call the LSP KYB flow, lots of acronyms, but that's our licensed service providers, colloquially the resellers of Wyoming stable tokens. And the KYB is know your business. So again, the goal for us is to be distributing Wyoming stable tokens directly to these parties that we've gone through a compliance check with. And then once we have confidence that they are able to do resale to their users, that the KYC, the AML is in place, and we can rely on them for that recirculation. So just to give you an idea how these will flow, an LSP will come to us and submit a KYB application. We will receive and review that. We'll have our own risk assessment matrix and intake for that. We'll also rely on some of our partners for additional cross-referencing, likely the on-chain analytics team for what they call KYT, or know your transaction, which means we can check wallet addresses to make sure everything is above board. And then also work with Inca, who is our open source intelligence provider, to make sure they've got no concerns as well. The Stable Token Commission will then receive those reports, make a determination if an LSP application is approved or denied. We'll let the LSP know what that decision is. If they're denied, they'll have to kind of go back to the start and try again. If they're approved, then we add their digital wallet addresses to a internal allow list, which would allow the commission, through its integration with Fireblocks, to distribute tokens to them and move towards automating more and more of that process over time. I know it's a little bit high level, but does that all sound good? Any questions on that?
Questions?
Just one, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Meyer.
I know this shows my ignorance, but if we could have a little, I guess, brief thing at the bottom of this that says what all the alphabet soup is in the charts. Okay, thank you.
Yes, if you look at the left-hand side, we typically have some of the definitions there. But I think over time, we'll probably have, as these expand, we'll have a little ledger on the bottom. You know, these steps are manual, these steps are automated. Everything will be manual functionally to start, but again, as we integrate more and more of the tech, as more of our partners come online and they integrate with each other, I would imagine we'd have a number of automated integrations on that. I would quickly just ask, and throughout the review of these charts, that if Keith Lawhorn, our Chief Information Security Officer, has anything to add, then let himself be known. But not hearing anything from him directly, we will keep continuing on. So the next one you have in front of you is the licensed service provider manual issuance flow. This is how our counterparties get Wyoming stable tokens from the commission. So a KYB LSP will submit an issuance request to the Stable Token Commission denominated in dollars. We receive that request. The LSP deposits funds to our custodian in USD. That custodian receives the funds and verifies those funds have been received and cleared. I want to be very specific about the clearance piece here, because we can't be issuing tokens just based on pending payments. It needs to be settled dollars in our account. We receive that notification the funds have been verified, received, and cleared. Then we're able to initiate a WIST minting request and approve that transaction. That would then leverage the Fireblocks platform, where they receive that approved request and facilitate the sign-off of that transaction to initiate minting on the blockchain. The blockchain receives the signed transaction and executes the WIST minting request, and then we as a commission receive a supply change notification that that has occurred. We then receive the minted WIST in our wallet, our digital wallet, as the commission, and we can effectuate a manual send to that licensed service provider, either directly to their wallet or a treasury if they have a treasury. They verify the receipt that they have received that WIST. So again, this is the manual flow. There's a couple manual steps here. Over time, as we have our LSPs integrate into our workflow through Fireblocks, the expectation is there be an automation of essentially dollars come in, we can click a button and it just gets sent out directly to their wallet, rather than having us as an intermediary that needs to manually send after it lands in our wallet. Again, happy to answer any questions, and through the chair would recognize Mr. Lawhorn if he's got anything to add.
I would just reiterate that these processes will be automated over time, and we're currently working through workflows for both the manual and what the ultimate goal would be for complete automation.
Thank you, Mr. Lawhorn.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Pope.
Mr. Director, thank you for that. What's the anticipated time frame from settled payment to the LSP receiving the tokens?
Through the chair, great question. If we have that notification come in based on a push API, that's milliseconds, comes to us, we receive a notification. If we are, we do a verification check perhaps. If that's a manual step, that might take a few minutes. If we are confident with the counterparty, and we've automated some of that behind the scenes, and because we can and we will be performing some of these checks at the blockchain level, allow list or deny list, for example. That may also just take a couple of seconds to use the Fireblocks application to approve the transaction. If it's, again, manual where the tokens end up in our wallet and then we need to resend it out, that could take up to a minute. If it's a direct issuance to a LSP's wallet, we're talking, again, milliseconds. So this is where, the blockchain selection exercise we performed is kind of optimized for highly efficient, high throughput chains, and that's a reflection, that speed is a reflection of this. Now, perhaps we need to think about the concept of hours of availability. Our team is almost online 24/7, but we're not quite online 24/7. So perhaps we need to think about times where we can expect to have these come in and times where we could process them first thing in the morning, and that is part of our reserves management rule set that's been drafted and is now under public comment. But I think I'm probably over-engineering the response at this point, but the short answer is, based on the actual blockchain infrastructure to move the funds around, we're talking seconds. Having the human component to do verifications or make sure we do our biometric confirmations and all that may take a few minutes, but that's the time scale we're talking about, not hours and not days.
Thank you. Commissioner Meyer. Did you have a question?
No,
Okay.
I'm just looking through there. I know what KYC is, but, thank you, Mr. Chairman. KYB, KYT, the honest or something there, what is that? Get on the one. Yeah, the OSINT, yeah.
Oh, so through the chair, KYB again is know your business, right? So that's
okay.
our check on a counterparty to make sure they meet our criteria to be a licensed service provider, to be a reseller of WIS tokens. We can't just send these out to anybody and assume that it'll be, everything will be in good order. We need to actually do some pretty substantial checks on that. And I will note that Ms. Brooks is already working on that framework along with the Paul Hastings team as part of our legal subcommittee meetings. KYT is Know Your Transaction. That is a service that is offered by the on-chain analytics providers where they can look at wallets associated with a given LSP and make sure that there's no illicit activity, transfers with unscrupulous counterparties. And again, we could put a key at the bottom of this to make this all very overt. We've defined it on the kind of the ledger on the left, but we'll make it overt on the bottom. And then OSINT, OSINT, is open source intelligence, right? So
Open source what?
intelligence. So this is where we're not giving up any data, but we have the Inca team monitoring different comms platforms,
I didn't get the last one.
Intelligence.
Oh, intelligence, open source intelligence, okay. I think I've been on the tractor longer too.
All right, if there's no other questions, happy to move on to the last flow we have, which is the manual redemption flow. Okay. So this is the reverse of the process we just talked about, where the LSP wants to receive tokens. Now this time around, they want to redeem their tokens. So a KYB, licensed service provider, will submit their redemption request to the Stable Token Commission. We receive that request. The LSP then sends their Wyoming stable tokens to a designated commission redemption address. So again, there's a digital wallet address. The blockchain itself will facilitate the transfer of Wyoming stable tokens between the LSP wallet and our wallet. And then we will receive that Wyoming stable token in the Stable Token Commission's redemption wallet. We'll verify that WIST has been received. We'll then initiate a transfer of funds in dollars from our custodian, who will then confirm the request, initiate that withdrawal, and send that over to the licensed service provider. They'll receive the funds in USD. We receive a notification of that withdrawal. And then once that happens, we'll initiate what's called a burn function of the WIST. So now that the WIST is no longer backed because that funding has been redeemed by a licensed service provider, we want to make sure we don't have Wyoming stable tokens that aren't backed by anything. The smart contracts will do include a burn function that'll essentially just delete those Wyoming stable tokens from the blockchain, for lack of a better term. The token supply would then be updated on the blockchain. That'll allow us to stay in conformance with hopefully something along the lines of real-time attestation of this many tokens outstanding, this much money in the bank, plus the over-collateralization. And this is one of the kind of mechanisms that keeps us in balance. So again, happy to take any questions on that, or again, through the chair, would offer to recognize Mr. Lawhorn with any further context.
Director, the only thing I'd ask, will have a more or less corresponding flow, I would assume, with regard to the backing. So in other words, after the electronic transaction occurs, et cetera, we'd have a similar flow as to how the transaction is going to be handled on the reserve side.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We could probably take a preliminary stab at that with the reserves management rules we already have in place. But I think that would likely just be kind of formalized downstream of finishing our negotiations and engaging an investment manager and custodian. And then we'll have kind of all the bits and pieces for you.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Pope, sorry.
And thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman, because this is the part that concerns me the most, is the redemption side. And this may reflect a little more of my ignorance on the financial markets than anything, but maybe someone can enlighten me. Given that the hours of trading desks are different, are not 24/7, and given that we have those types of constraints, or may have those types of constraints, in situations where there are large-scale redemptions, what types of turnaround times would we look at for funding those redemptions? How do we deal with situations where there may be excess requests over cash held, and where we would have to redeem treasuries in order to fund the redemptions? And all of those, I would maybe just a quick education, and then maybe afterward you can fill me in detail.
Through the chair, Commissioner Pope, I think there's a couple questions in there. One is, again, what you're asking about is the traditional finance rails that are involved here, right? So when we're talking about that side of the house, we have it's possible that when we're working with those counterparties, that's the 9 to 5, 5 days a week kind of situation. We've accommodated that in our rulemaking process, particularly around the reserves management piece. I'm just trying to read a little bit here. For example, upon receipt of the payment and satisfaction of compliance review of the transaction, this is for the issuance side of things, but we shall issue the number of Wyoming stable tokens to the licensed service provider promptly, but in no event no more than 2 business days after receipt of the payment, right? So again, that's the issuance side, works on the redemption side as well, but that, there's the T+2 consideration is alive and well when we talk about traditional financial counterparties, right? Again, as I mentioned in my prior answer, right, we need to start thinking internally about hours at which should be expected that we're going to be confirming these transactions. I'm open to have that conversation. And again, I think a lot of what you're talking about in terms of denominations, if I heard correctly, or just, not denominations necessarily, but the, redemption beyond the cash balance. Well, that's going to be part of the investment policy statement that's handled with the reserves manager. We do have a priority to be a fairly liquid pool of reserves, right? Even though we have 365 days for U.S. Treasuries, 30 days for repos, I would expect we're managing closer to probably about 7 to 14 on that. And if you look at the Circle Fund with BlackRock, that's their WAM and their WAL are both around there. And then I think in terms of, and I may have misheard, but if there's a question about the largesse of a certain transaction, even beyond just going past our cash balance, what does a control framework look like? That's certainly something that we're working on. I expect that when we gauge our internal controls counterparty, we'll have a more specific conversation about that. But internally, that's a reason that we've identified as, what does the controls look like? And I can say that with the Fireblocks platform, there's a lot of fine-grained tuning around how transactions get approved to the multi-signature process. So if we feel that a transaction amongst X dollar amount should require another set of eyes, we can facilitate that. If it's not necessarily the dollar amount, but a percentage of our market supply, we can facilitate that. So there's a number of controls that can come into play through that process. And we've got the technical side of the house, we'll get the regulatory side of the house with our internal controls partner, and then we'll bring it all together.
Thank you. Mr. Saldana, did you have, you came back online. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to this.
I think Anthony, the Director Apollo, expressed it very well. In my sense, it's going to operate very much like a traditional cash desk, except on very fast rails. But I believe our rules that are in place are designed to help us mitigate any volatility surrounding the activity between the minting and burning and the liquidation or investments on the reserve side. I think the T+2 factor, as well as the hours of operation for the agency, provide enough buffer for us to address any operating concerns that that Commissioner Pope has mentioned.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Meyer.
One thing that I want to bring up, and I probably shouldn't have to, because I'm sure you probably thought about it, but from time to time, you know, unscrupulous people will try to buy something with a draft or do, you know, some assurance from a bank or something that the money's there. Well, I just want to make sure that we never issue any tokens until we absolutely know 100% sure that you've got available funds that can't be, you know, pulled back, or some crook tries to take advantage of our system one way or the other. So we've seen it a lot in agricultural areas and things like that, and commodities, but maybe not so much in other areas. But essentially the token is a commodity from that standpoint. So, and once they have it, I don't know whether our rules allow us to, you know, repossess them or freeze them, you know, if the check doesn't clear, or if you're waiting on a draft. I would just say make sure that you never use those circumstances, and they never show up. So have some ironclad ways to make sure that the transaction part of it at the end of the day is clean.
So through the chair.
Director. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. So that is exactly the reason why we talked about the issuance flow, the importance of only minting tokens after the funds have formally cleared and we can verify the payment, right? That way we're not, you know, waiting on a check that might bounce along the way. That's one of the verifications that we feel is critical to get this done appropriately. And then, of course, we do expect to have those freeze and seize capabilities, but that would be downstream of like overt illicit activity with court orders in place. So those controls are there, and maybe those are applicable in the scenarios you're talking about. Maybe they're not, but that is also something we're monitoring as well.
Very good. Further conversation on this point.
Governor, can you hear me?
Commissioner Navis.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Anthony said for Kurt's question. Kurt, this is different than when you're dealing in trading in commodities. The transfer, the receipt, and confirmed receipt of the payment is required prior to issuance. So that's how it's always done. But again, it's different than trading commodities. Just want to provide that context to you. And then for David's question around mass redemptions, if there is a request for mass redemption at that point, then the commission should have been notified about that. We would need to look at what is being redeemed, stability around the issuance, who is trying to redeem and why. That has happened to issuers, private issuers in the past, and the process is similar, and it will be similar to what the commission would experience at that time.
Well, I know a situation that we're aware of once is that person sold a bunch of cattle. He got a draft, called the bank that the draft was made on, the monies were in the fund, let the cattle go down the road, and the draft was called back. You know, so those are things that drafts aren't a check. They're an instrument for, I guess if you trust somebody, maybe you can do that, but, you know, never trust anybody in this situation is what I'm saying.
You're right, Kurt. And in this case, since the payment is not going to be made by hand, right? No one is going to be delivering anything to anyone to take away physical property like a commodity. The likelihood of that happening is low, but absolutely attention to nefarious actors or anyone trying to deceive the process is something that has been thought about as the redemption process will be put in place. Absolutely.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other comments on the process flows, I'd suggest we move on to the next topic.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent.
Doesn't look like we have any other comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this will be the last phase of the Q1 blockchain selection exercise, which we call Q1 because we started it in Q1. Maybe we adjust that along the way. This will probably take less time than it looks like it will. Just to kind of replay what we've done. Again, we've got a lot of interest in what we're building. During our review of the procurement rules before going through the full promulgation process, we did add a chapter to the extent that we can have rolling qualifications for both vendors and blockchains. And while those rules are still in that promulgation process, we've taken it upon ourselves to continue as a best practice just going forward with the quarterly review. So within that quarter, month 1 will be a review of the criteria. And if there's an update required, we have the commission approve that. Month 2 will be preliminary assessment of the chains that are interested in potentially working with us. And then month 3 is kind of our final determination about whether or not we want to add candidate blockchains to our selection. So the memo in front of you, pages 1, 2, and 3 are verbatim the same we saw last month. So if anyone's getting deja vu, that's why. And that's all just kind of the preamble to let you know how we got to where we are at the end of this process, which is at the top of page 4, our preliminary assessment. So for month 2, when that preliminary assessment came in, we believe there was 2 networks that passed our binary criteria, inclusive of vendor support, which is one of the ones that we've added. However, one of those blockchains we thought may be disqualified due to additional concerns pertaining to its technical robustness. So now the new piece here, we've gone, since that last meeting in April, we've gone through and had some conversations with those first-party teams and confirmed with them what they, what they're seeing on their side, and we would go and try to validate with them as well as third-party kind of independent support and data. So we are of the opinion at this point, we being the agency, that 3 blockchain networks passed the binary criteria inclusive of vendor support. One of those was disqualified for inclusion during this quarter's review due to additional concerns pertaining to its technical robustness, which was essentially a smart contract exploit, and as well as a successful phishing attempt on the team who ran that platform that may have resulted in people being coaxed into creating transactions they didn't want to create. So with the updated criteria scoring, the back and forth, the agency believes that we would add 2 candidate blockchains to our scope, those being the Aptos and the Say blockchains receiving scores of 32 and 30 respectively. We did not present these against the scores of our existing candidate blockchains because these have had a couple of extra points available to them by the criteria we added. But I think in Q2 or Q3, if we want to jump ahead, we would probably, assess them all together and rescore some of the older ones as well. So the proposed next steps would be to inform the Aptos and Say blockchains. Their platforms are now considered candidates for WIST issuance in the future. We'd publish the results of our binary criteria review, as well as the subsequent scoring of additional benefits and concerns, which is the long paper you have in front of you, which we don't need to go through, but want to present that all for your kind of FYI. And again, we will continue to share all of the details about this process like we have since the start. It'll all be online and public. And then we'll look to initiate the Q2 exercise, the next regular meeting of the commission, which will be June 19th. That would be, again, reassessing our scoring criteria. Maybe we want to make some changes, maybe we don't, but that'll be on the docket. And then we continue to kind of bounce around on the idea that perhaps there'll be a parallel process for UTXO-based blockchains. UTXO stands for unspent transactions. That's different infrastructure like Bitcoin and some of the other blockchains that are built with that framework. Very different code base, not as robust of a stable coin ecosystem there, but something that we're keeping an eye on because we do have a mandate from the state legislature to be multi-chain and tech agnostic. So we'll continue to kind of observe that as we move forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, I guess, Director, looking at the additional concerns on your score sheet here, I don't know exactly what IDQ technical formality is, but the two that are coming on board, you both have a no there and in green, and then the one above it that there, I guess it has yes technical formality. I think that's
Correct.
Formality. I get my glasses so I can actually read that.
Yeah, Mr. Through the chair,
Yeah.
Commissioner Meyer, understanding this is not the most legible document
Yeah.
we put in front of you. You are correct, it's technical formidability.
Yeah.
That does tie back to our selection criteria that we passed in kind of the first stage of all of this. These are the additional concerns. So if you see no in green, that's good. There are no additional concerns. But IDQ stands for immediate disqualification.
For what?
Immediate disqualification.
Oh,
which was one of our
immediate
criteria.
disqualification. So a no is good because it's green, but I just didn't know what that was.
Correct.
Yeah, and, okay, all right, well, that makes a little bit more sense on why a no got there, but you had some, technical, things there too, and one was a -1 and one is a 0, so what was this, the scale on, all this? Is this all a scale of 10 or what?
So the scale, so through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, the scale for the additional benefits and the additional concerns scales from 0 to 2. For additional benefits, it's, you don't have what we're looking for, it's 0. If you've got the best version of it, you get 2 points. So it's 0, 1, 2. On the flip side, for concerns, if it's something that is a negative, we want to, dock a couple points for that. That's where the flip side comes around. So
Okay.
0 is good. And then for something that's a pretty big ding, you get a -2, and if it's something a little ding, you get a -1. But there also, in the additional concerns piece here, there are, as you point out, these IDQs, which is the immediate disqualification. If you recall from the first time we did this exercise, the Binance blockchain was disqualified. They were very technically savvy, one of the biggest user bases there is, but their team activity, their founder did some time in jail, right? So we've disqualified them as a result. So that's how we came to this mix.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions on this? And I will remember this time that we wrote the director's recommendation for a motion on the last page of the document, which is to approve the addition of Aptos and Say as candidate blockchains on which WIST may be launched in the future.
Members of the commission, with the director's recommendation, had a good discussion. Thank you for your diligence, director and staff. What is the pleasure of the commission?
Well, I guess I got one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I think I know the answer, but I want clarification. Vendor supported, looks like we got quite a few here that are vendor supported, but just are any of these chains that are not vendor supported by our current vendors, if we had the capacity to onboard them from the vendor scenario, would there be any others that would be onboarded if we had that capacity?
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, I think the short answer is yes. I need to go through kind of one by one.
Yeah.
But for, let's say, on-chain analytics, that's certainly one. On-chain analytics, again,
Yeah.
kind of the know your transaction piece we talked about. There's several major providers. Some cover this set, some cover the other.
Right.
So that's, one example where you can kind of stack different providers. And to be clear, most of the large exchanges and other kind of enterprise teams do exactly that. We are a small team with a small budget, so we're not able to kind of
Well,
provide
we
that.
don't need every blockchain in the universe on our.
Also true.
Token, so
the-
I think we've got a good supply. I was just wondering if there's, at some point in time, your answer was yes, so that's what I thought it would be, and I know why now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
Mr.
good.
Chairman.
Commissioner Racinas.
I would move the director's recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there support for the Commissioner motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Naves. That second has been recorded. Is there any discussion? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Recommendation is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So typically we save the executive session for last. This would be about last, but I would recommend that we move into an executive session for the purpose of receiving confidential information, i.e. privileged information from the Attorney General's office under Wyoming Statute 16-4-405, subsection A, Romanet 9.
Thank you, Director. If there's a motion to be made, please make that.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we enter into executive session for the purposes of receiving legal advice.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Meyer. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we will be moving into executive session. Director, if you'd make sure the room is secure. And there's been a request for a quick break.
Thank you, Mr.
So we'll
Chairman.
have 5 minutes to get the room secure, et cetera.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And back to our normal agenda, we are at item 8, financial authorization memo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman, and recognizing that Chairman Gordon did have to depart. I don't believe he's on the line, but we'll continue monitoring that. So real quick on this one, and this is, we've had discussions around policies that may need to be put in place. One of the things that we identified as we were looking to fill out our forms as part of the negotiations with our reserves managers is we need authorized signatories. In the reserves management rules, the commission has already approved as part of that draft the ability for the executive director and any of the commission staff that he so delegates to, so it's our C-suite executives, may be able to perform functions including opening, closing, managing, transferring monies, initiating deposits or else payments or transfer of funds, and et cetera. The difficulty with that is those reserves and management rules have not been promulgated yet. So while I think we're aligned on the intent of the commission and the authority given to the director and the delegates, because those rules are not yet in force, we've drafted a very quick memo here, rather than, a very robust policy, just to, again, try to immediately confer that signing authority for the executive director and delegates, so we can get moving on the accounts with our reserves management counterparties. And again, I'm working through this quickly because I know we've got public comment coming up and winding down, but let me know if that makes sense. This is all of, a page and a half. Just looking for the authority that, again, we've already had agreed upon in rules, just looking for a way to get a particular carve out ahead of the rules being promulgated so we can move forward on the reserves management.
And Director, do you actually need action on this, or is this just sort of documenting the thought process until we have those rules in force?
Madam Chairman, this is the second, I would say, first and a half time I maybe didn't put the motion on here and should have, but we found the other one, but I don't think we have one here. It would probably be good to have a motion that to provide that authority. Again, the commission kind of has already in the rules, but this is just kind of, we're in a bit of a gray zone, and I don't want to be held up from moving forward on our contracting because we don't have formal authority to sign off on anything.
And Director, and maybe I should know this, but with other similarly held trust accounts throughout the state, who are the signers on those? Or is there dual signatories, or do we know?
Madam Chairman, I do not know off the top of my head. I do know Commissioner Meyer may have an idea. Mr. Kenny may also have an idea, not to put you on the spot after we have you on the dais, but regarding trust account signatories and other accounts, the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, how many signatories, and would that include the director or elected officials? I don't know off the top of my head.
So Kurt, the question is, there's a memo before us until we have rules passed to essentially have the director and the CFO be the signers on the trust account. And my question is, how do other trust accounts operate throughout the state? Is that typical to have just one person be able to move money, and you are the most likely person to maybe have some experience with that in your office? Or does there have to be a second, if Anthony wants to move $3 million out of the account, does there have to be dual signatories on that, or is this a fairly typical setup?
I think it's usually a simple setup where you have different people that are authorized with that on a signatory.
Gotcha.
Just like doing a bank account.
Okay.
More or less.
Okay.
There's the process that goes on is that you actually have different parts, like the CIO will sign off on different parts, and then that will go to the accounting department. They'll have a signature, and then when it gets to the point like when you're putting on managers or something like that, then essentially then it's the treasurer, the executive director that does that. So, it's just any other kind of compliance that anyone can do over the details on that, on the compliance on these different services. You've been working for about the last 6 months, updating our compliance. So I would say you got another job, Norm.
Commissioner Pope?
Just briefly, I would really love to hear Commissioner Wallace's perspective, being a banker and understanding control systems and how wide of a net we have to cast to observe control practices over trust accounts.
I think that's the beauty of a bank, is they put that responsibility on the account owner. But yeah, I mean, this to me would be like similar to a resolution from a corporation allowing authorization. So, I mean, is there limits that we would want to set as far as how much you need one signature or two signatures as far as transfer amounts? Do we want one person to be authorized to transfer $100 million themselves, or do we need two signatures for that? Or
And my inclination is no, but I might not be thinking about that correctly. Go ahead, Director.
And thank you, Madam Chairman, and good point. I think what we're hearing is about the controls environment. Again, we have a much more robust policy document we're working on, multiple pages long, covering types of accounts and things like these thresholds. We simply need the authority to be able to open an account so we can move forward and not spend another 2 weeks waiting to contract with a financial counterparty, which needs 6 to 8 weeks to actually functionally open the account once it gets money in it. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to move $100 million. If we want to make the motion just to we can put myself and the executive director of an agency and the CFO of an agency as signers who can open a bank account. From my perspective, I think that's appropriate.
Commissioner Pope?
Just one more comment. I would suggest a third person, possibly from the commission, just that is only allowed in the event that the two become unavailable or incapacitated or something like that. We are looking at a significant amount of money, and that is on the shoulders of only two people. So that's my only potential recommendation. And if there's a better way to do it, then I think we can look at that as well.
Madam Chairman,
Go ahead.
then the other thing that I know that we do, when we have access to certain computers, like for JP Morgan, they have actually a key fob. We've got biometrics on some of the stations, so I'd say make sure you're that end of the security thing there, because it's more likely that we're going to get money taken out of by a nefarious character than our director and those folks. So it's just that all that stuff needs to be put in order, and that's just another compliance.
And Director, what set of rules are these going to be coming under? Sorry, remind me of that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we already have reserves management rules that are currently in their public comment format, and there's an entire section delegating responsibilities to the executive director. These are two of maybe 12 or 14 different items, because as came up in our meeting last month, this is not an agency where the powers of the director are enumerated in statute. The commission has enumerated powers, and they can delegate to the director. So that's why we're going bit by bit here, piece by piece, and kind of layering things up along the way. So again, we can, however the commission wants to put forward the motion, of course, is your prerogative, but really all I need is Joe and myself to be able to open an account. And we can come back to the meeting on the 19th with a much more robust version of the document with all the controls, especially if we're talking about gates and whatnot. I'm happy to do that.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the Commissioner, Anthony Apollo, and CFO Joseph Saldana the authority to open accounts as needed.
Okay, any further discussion, and then we'll await some refinement of this at the next meeting?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Don't spend it all in one place.
Friendly reminder that there's not that much money to spend, Madam Chair.
Don't spend that deficit all in one place.
Yes, don't spend the obligation in one place. Okay, so we've got 8 minutes left on the clock. I'm going to quickly run through next steps, and then we'll open for public comment with whatever time we have left. So real quick from my side, we've got, again, focuses vendor contracts, and then redeploying the alpha tokens with the Fireblocks and Layer Zero collaborative platform. In terms of meetings and events, we're meeting next, same room, same time on June 19th. And then we've got one in here on July 17th as well. Also, we're only a few weeks away, as I said earlier, from the next interim meeting of the Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Technology, and Digital Innovation on July 10th. And I do believe, because this is a little bit over my head on the legislative side, I believe that the Select Committees only have 4 days to meet now and not 6. So these will be a one-day meet instead of back-to-back as they typically are. If there's no other questions, anything I've talked about over the course of the day, we could open it up for public comment at the behest of the chairman. I will note that duration will be limited to 3 minutes per speaking party or 1 question from an online participant. Speakers will be asked to provide their first name, last name, and affiliation for the public record per Wyoming Statute 16-4-403B. The quorum will be governed by the rules and standards of Management Council Policy 1803 and Wyoming Statute 16-4-406.
All right, thank you, Director. With that, we'll move into public comment. I'll start first here in the room. Is there any public comment? Okay, moving to online. Do we have any public comment from online? Okay, go ahead. Looks like we have Carrie Agin. Carrie, would just go ahead and identify yourself and provide us with your public comment.
Yes, can you hear me okay, Chairman?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. I don't know why my camera's not working, but I'll just go ahead. I'll proceed. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Carrie Agin, Buffalo resident, a retired geoscientist and holder of 2 degrees from the Colorado School of Mines. First of all, the Wyoming stable token is very clearly unconstitutional, as I described during the Corporations Committee meeting earlier this month. It's even stated on the stable token webpage that it's a currency and will be minted or coined. To be constitutional, the state needs to amend the Wyoming Constitution, and I very seriously, Wyomingites will approve that. Second, the Wyoming stable token is a Ponzi scheme. There will come a time when it will collapse or be subsumed into another form, maybe some other cryptocurrency, maybe even a central bank digital currency. As all cryptos will be using blockchain, altering their exact form and use will be easy peasy. The stable token will only be used as long as folks taking it in exchange for some real good or service have confidence that they can exchange it themselves. When that confidence is gone, then it will collapse. It is a confidence game, a con game. When that time comes, the last holders of stable tokens will not be able to redeem them, thus left with nothing. And it's not just a Ponzi scheme, but a Ponzi scheme built upon another Ponzi scheme, because the US dollar is itself a Ponzi scheme. Again, it's a con game. People only take it as long as they believe that they can exchange it for something else. In addition, the stable token will not even really exist. Anything digital doesn't really exist. It's electrons, actually the movement of electrons seen on computer screens via photons, visible light. And the digital asset is not really an asset at all. It's just a digital description or representation of a real asset. It has no inherent value. It is fiat. And it's not only fiat, it's fiat backed by the fiat US dollar. And everything digital can be hacked, altered, transferred, erased, so on and so forth. I've heard no guarantees whatsoever from the state regarding the safety and security or privacy made to Wyoming stable token holders. It's very interesting. The state wants to hold folks' U.S. treasuries as collateral to help keep the stable token pegged appropriately. So the value of their treasuries is really the value of the stable token. So it just reinforces that it's fiat. Yet the state also offers no guarantees that anyone will actually be able to exchange any for anything else, let alone matching the values of the treasuries they exchange for it. And the state offers no guarantees to Wyoming taxpayers that the millions in their taxpayer monies that they've spent on this albatross will be repaid, let alone make a profit. In summary, the Wyoming stable token is unconstitutional and combines into one product the worst financial schemes all rolled into one. I have to congratulate the commission on this incredible feat of smoke and mirrors. I pray that very few people buy into this charade for which they may get nothing in return. I cannot urge the commission strongly enough to stop wasting their time and our taxpayer dollars on this abomination. Thank you, Chairman. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Agin. I do believe we have a question from Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Carrie. There's amazingly enough, I think there are some cryptocurrencies out there that are Ponzi schemes because they're basically backed by more cryptocurrencies. And so in that regard, I can assure you that that's not the structure that the stable token has. But I'm just curious whether you have a debit or credit card.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioner Meyer. I have both debit cards and credit cards.
And that is, I guess, the most ubiquitous form of digital currency. because it's all electrons coming from your bank account, and I'm assuming it's got US dollars in your bank account. So, but there's only 16 characters on my credit card, and I think there's probably all on yours. And I know that maybe the director Apollo can tell me how many digits are associated with cracking, a state stable coin, but it might be hundreds or it might be thousands. But I know I only got 16 on my credit card, plus my key card as far as my passcode. So, to the extent that the whole economy is a Ponzi scheme and we all rely on everybody else to continue to have this interesting concept in capitalism continue, I think we're not as at risk with the stable token as a credit card. And I assure you, I still think for the most part that most banks have fair business practices. There are some that don't, and stay tuned on that one. So, Carrie, thanks for stopping by. Always welcome. If you ever get down to Cheyenne, come up, have a chat at the treasurer's office.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioner. Yes, you're right. The entire U.S. financial system is a Ponzi scheme. How we can remedy this is to go back to real money backed by real actual assets like gold and silver, for example. Thank you, and I'd very much love to meet all of you. Thank you.
Well, stay tuned for the legislative committee, because I think we're going to be looking at a gold-backed stable token. Would be the easiest way to invest in gold, and a lot more safe and secure than an ETF. So keep your ears and eyes open for what those guys are up to.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks again for comment. Any other online comment? Okay, with that, any final words? We have our next meetings already on the docket, so for the good of the order, anything? Any motions? Any motions?
Can we move to adjourn now?
You may. Is there a second?
Yeah, there we go.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
All right, meeting adjourned.